Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Song Ke sped along at top speed, radiating killing intent, completely confident that his aunt would take the lead in presiding over justice. She would either kill Night Crypt or force him to submit to Song Ke. I'm the firstborn of the Song clan. If it weren't for Bai Xiaochun from the Spirit Stream sect, I would have definitely reached Heaven Dao Foundation establishment. Then I wouldn't have to help Aunt Junwan become Blood Master, I would have been able to take the spot myself. He was like a streak of light speeding toward the upper finger. Well, I can't do anything about that now. Besides, Aunt Junwan only wants to become the Blood Master for strategic purposes, to make sure that Shui Mei doesn't take the spot. Just wait until I'm in late Foundation establishment, then I can fight for the position of Blood Master on my own. This piddling Night Crypt, if I can make use of him in the future, I will, but if he refuses to accept my good graces, I'll kill him and make sure he never gets a proper burial. More confident than ever, he rumbled along through the upper finger toward Grand Elder Song Junwan's Immortals cave behind the Blood Lake. Once he was behind the waterfalls, he saw the 4 young guards. Instantly, their eyes snapped open, glowing brightly as they observed him approaching. Song Ke didn't even pause. Just as he was about to enter the Immortals cave itself, the 4 young attendants threw themselves in his path. One of those young guards was very well aware of the high position Song Ke occupied. Even still, he didn't dare do anything other than try to block his path. Bracing himself, he said, "Elder Song, please wait a moment," for the fact that the young attendants were blocking his path caused Song Ke to frown. Then his rage and killing intent soared, and he roared, "Get the hell out of my way. I have something to talk about with the Grand Elder." Usually, he never had any problems entering Song Junwan's Immortals cave. Considering his status, he didn't technically have free rein to come and go as he pleased, but for all intents and purposes, could. After all, Song Junwan was quite fond of her nephew. But now the young attendants actually dared to stand in his way. Song Ke snorted coldly, then pushed them aside and proceeded forward. The 4 young attendants' faces flickered, and they were of a mind to try to stop him. After all, they were fairly certain that it was important to keep the identity of the other person inside the cave a secret. However, they were not really capable of stopping Song Ke. Before they could even react, Song Ke was inside the door. Usually, Song Ke wouldn't act so impulsively. However, this was his aunt, and he was also consumed by rage. Because of that, he had completely lost his usual cool. Besides, as far as he was concerned, he wasn't asking for anything outrageous. In the instant that he set foot inside the Immortals cave, and before he could even get into the main hall, he heard his aunt laughing, a strange laughter that seemed both cheerful and chiding at the same time. Looking surprised, Song Ke hurried forward. When he brushed the door curtain aside, a sight met his eyes that left him completely and utterly thunderstruck. As his mind spun, his jaw dropped. He almost couldn't believe the incredulous scene which was playing out right in front of him. There was his aunt, Song Junwan, sitting on a chair, laughing lightly, her left hand covering her mouth the way a woman would in front of her lover. Night Crypt sat next to her, clasping her right hand, studying it closely. He even seemed to be sniffing it delicately as he leaned over. Song Ke was virtually struck mute. He felt like he might fall over from the shock, and even wondered if he was hallucinating. However, the scandalous image which was now burned into his mind couldn't be mistaken for anything else, and left Song Ke stunned. The moment Song Ke entered the room, Song Junwan pulled her hand out of Bai Xiaochun's. Her smile vanished, and she coughed dryly. Expression somber, and looking very much like someone from the senior generation, she turned her gaze toward Song Ke. "How rude of you to barge in like that," she said. "What's the matter?" Although she was trying to look like someone from the senior generation, her cheeks were still flushed. That combination of flirtatiousness and somberness made her unbelievably attractive. At the same time, she felt somewhat humiliated and angry. If any other person had burst in the way Song Ke had, she would have punished that person severely. But Song Ke was her nephew, so there was little she could do. Startled by Song Ke's sudden entrance, Bai Xiaochun quickly sat up straight and proper. He actually felt a bit guilty for having been caught in the act. After giving Song Junwan the spirit medicine he'd concocted, he had taken advantage of the moment to offer to read her palm. Song Junwan had never forgotten his amazing performance in the Spirit Stream sect, and had immediately allowed him to take hold of her hand. Then he had showered her with praise and compliments, causing her to laugh in delight. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath and sat in place, looking at Song Ke just as somberly as Song Junwan was. Song K stood there panting for a long moment before he pulled himself together. Even still, he almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. In his eyes, his aunt was a lofty and magnificent figure, and yet here she was allowing a virtual stranger to grab her hand. Then she even laughed flirtatiously. Although all of that was completely beyond anything Song K could ever have anticipated, he might have been able to accept it if the person who had just been holding his aunt's hand was someone other than the infuriating Night Crypt. Song Q's anger began to rise to explosive levels until he could hardly breathe. His eyes burned bright red as he glared at Bai Xiaochun and madly howled, "Night Crypt." Taking a step forward, he looked over at his aunt, Grand Elder Song Junwan. Mind spinning with rage, he cried, "Aunt Junwan, ever since Night Crypt came to Middle Peak, he's caused one disaster after another. All the disciples here hate his guts because of how he's screwed them over. I actually suspect that he's a spy, sent to sow chaos in the Bloodstream sect. Aunt Junwan, please make an example of him and expel him from the sect." As his cries echoed about in the Immortals cave, Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered, and anger began to rise in his heart as he realized that Song K had come here to complain about him. Unfortunately, Song K was actually right about some of his accusations, which caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to leap in fright. Just when he was about to speak up to defend himself, Song Junwan's face turned grim, and she slapped her hand down onto the table. The resounding smacking sound that rang out instantly drowned out Song Q's voice. "Shut up," she said, her expression grim and murderous. As her voice echoed out, the Immortals cave suddenly turned very, very cold, causing Song K to shiver. From a very young age, he had always feared this aunt of his, and to see her so mad caused him to subconsciously look down at his toes. Seeing Song K react in such a way sated a bit of Song Junwan's anger. He was her nephew, whom she loved dearly. Looking both sincere and also profoundly disappointed, she slowly said, "Care, you're the firstborn of the Song clan. There are no limits to what you could do in the future. How could you be so muddle-headed and short-sighted? Night Crypt has a clean background, and has performed great services for the sect. It's true he's annoyed some of the other members of the sect, but none of that was intentional. Neither you nor I know the full extent of the humiliation he endured on the path of pursuing the Tao of medicine for the sect." From the tone of her voice, she seemed to truly lament her nephew's unreasonable behavior. As he sat there off to the side, Bai Xiaochun felt deeply moved. He gazed softly over at Song Junwan, and mused that everything she said was correct. He never intentionally did things to annoy or harm others. He suddenly felt as if Song Junwan understood him on a deep and even intimate level. In fact, he really had nothing bad to say about how the Bloodstream sect had treated him. Even as Bai Xiaochun sighed inwardly, Song K stood there trembling. From the time he was young, he had often been rebuked by his aunt, and he had rarely ever talked back to her. But the situation right now was something he just couldn't accept. That was especially true considering the emotional look on Bai Xiaochun's face. Song K couldn't help but think about how Night Crypt had been holding his aunt's hand, and how the two of them clearly seemed to be involved in some illicit affair. Song Q's breath came in ragged pants as he looked up and said, "Night Crypt, you." When Song Junwan saw that Song K was refusing to acknowledge his mistakes, her expression turned even grimmer, and she angrily yelled, "Care. Back down." Then she looked at Bai Xiaochun and said, "Junior brother Night Crypt, please don't take offense. Care just doesn't understand adult matters, the little brat." Bai Xiaochun sighed. Looking like the picture of someone from the senior generation, he nodded and smiled bitterly. "There's no harm in it," he said. "Care is young and full of energy, which is normal at his age. Members of the senior generation like us can only do our best to educate him a bit more." When Song K heard Bai Xiaochun call him Care, he felt like he was about to go insane. His cultivation base immediately surged with power, and a murderous aura spread out from him. "Night Crypt, I'm gonna kill you," he howled, and then charged toward Bai Xiaochun. Because he was so close, there was no time for Song Junwan to interfere. Rumbling sounds could be heard as Song K performed an incantation gesture, summoning a huge blood-colored hand almost directly in front of Bai Xiaochun's face. The hand surged with energy, destroying the chair and table. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flashed up in thought for the briefest of moments, and he decided not to dodge or evade. The hand slammed into him, causing his face to go pale. Coughing up a mouthful of blood, he staggered backward. Seeing that, Song Junwan was both worried and angry. She waved her hand, causing a wave of power to surge out and suppress Song K. Incapable of moving forward, Song K stood there, eyes bloodshot, trembling physically. He knew that Night Crypt had intentionally spit out some blood. Even if he had been injured somehow, there was no way he should have coughed up any blood. "Song K, What gall you have? Song Junwan yelled at the top of her lungs. Just when she was about to start reprimanding Song Ke, Bai Xiaochun raised his right hand to stop her. Wiping the blood off of his chin, he looked over at Song Junwan and said, Care did nothing wrong. I might be of the senior generation, but I'm not perfect. I make mistakes too. It's my fault that Care is now hairless. Therefore, I will immediately go into seclusion to concoct some spirit medicine to help him grow some more hair. He even reached out and squeezed her hand to show how sincere he was. Song Junwan's cheeks immediately flushed bright red. To have her hand squeezed right in front of her own nephew was something that instantly caused her heart to start racing. It was a very odd sensation. Pulling her hand back, she looked over at Song Ke and angrily said, Care, apologize immediately to your sect uncle. Song Ke stood there trembling, blue veins bulging out on his neck and face. Laughing shrilly, he said, You too, Fornica. Before he could finish speaking, Song Junwan's eyes flashed with cold light, and she waved her hand. A huge wind swept over Song Ke, carrying him out of the immortals' cave. Song Ke, your impertinence has earned you 3 months in secluded meditation. Don't step a foot outside of your immortals' cave during that time. Bai Xiaochun didn't feel that it was appropriate to stay in the immortals' cave any longer. Looking over at the grim-faced Song Junwan, he gave a soft sigh, then bid her farewell. Song Junwan hesitated for a moment, and then nodded. After offering some more apologies for Song Q's behavior, she said, We have a few more months before the war. Middle Peak is going to have its trial by fire for the position of Bloodmaster. When the time comes, I hope you'll be able to help me. Her eyes shone with keen anticipation. Bai Xiaochun looked back at her, his own eyes flashing. After a moment passed, he nodded, then left. Once outside of the immortals' cave, his heart swelled with pride. Taking a deep breath, he reveled in his satisfaction at having mopped the floor with Song Ke. HMMMPHH. From now on, Care, I'm your clan uncle. Feeling wonderful, but expression pale and grim, he returned thoughtfully to his immortal's cave on the lower finger. Once inside, he stretched lazily, thinking about how he now outranked Song Ke. Then he waved his wide sleeve. Whatever. As a member of the senior generation, it's my job to help educate the youngsters. Sitting down cross-legged, he put aside the matters of the day and began to practice cultivation. At the same time, he was continuously analyzing the methods of concocting Tier 4 spirit medicines. Although his recent concocting efforts had been a success, he still didn't feel completely content with the results. Must have been problems with the pill furnaces, he thought with a sigh. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his ideas regarding concocting medicine would cause virtually any pill furnace to explode. The only thing he could do to prevent that from happening was to try to make the medicine less powerful. However, that would limit him to making the medicine about half as strong as he could, which left him feeling somewhat apathetic. What a pity, he thought with a sigh. I guess my medicine concocting will be limited in this way for now. Considering there was nothing to be done about the matter, he decided that he would just have to wait until he got back to the Spirit Stream sect. Then he could ask Li Qinghao about the situation. When it came to cultivation, he didn't waste any time. During the following days, he spent all day absorbing blood qi and working on the second volume of the Undying Live Forever technique, the Undying Heavenly King. The first level of the Undying Heavenly King was the 10 Mammoths Berserk Ghost Body, which he had already completed perfectly. The second level was the 10 Ghosts Heavenly Demon Body. Because of his diligent hard work, and also the fact that the Bloodstream sect was a holy land for the Undying Live Forever technique, his continuous absorption of blood qi soon helped him break through to the power level of 4 ghosts. Although he had no way to test out how strong he actually was, based on some basic calculations, Bai Xiaochun was convinced that he was terrifyingly powerful. In fact, he was sure that he was strong enough to beat almost anything that might cross his path. He was so strong in terms of his flesh and blood that he was nearly invincible. Not only were his offensive capabilities enough to rock mountains and rivers, he had colossal defenses as well. Song Q's all-out attack earlier had felt like nothing more than a scratch to Bai Xiaochun, and the blood he had coughed up had been forcibly pushed out by drawing upon the power of his own spiritual seas. And then there was the divine ability which came with the Undying Heavenly King, the mountain-shaking bash. Although he hadn't come across many chances to practice it, on the few occasions when he had, he could sense how shockingly powerful it was. In fact, he was convinced that if he unleashed it to full effect, he really could bash a hole into a gigantic mountain. When it came to bashing into people, well, it was obvious what fate they would meet. At this point, I think I'm actually more powerful than one of those heavenly demons. He suddenly scooped his hand down into the stone floor, and it felt like he was scooping up some tofu. There was almost no sensation at all as he pulled out a chunk of rock and then crushed it into ash. When he thought about how much more powerful he was than before, his excitement rose. Every time he absorbed blood chi, he felt indescribably wonderful. He also worked on his blood annihilation world, and although he didn't actually notice, he was getting much quicker at forming blood swords. The blood swords he formed were also more powerful. When he absorbed blood chi, he almost felt like he was at one with Middle Peak, as if he himself could shake the mountain itself. Of course, he didn't dare an actual attempt, for fear that things could quickly get out of control. As for his violet chi heavenspan incantation, his fundamental technique, and the only truly hidden Taoist magic in the spirit stream sect, it was as the saying went, everything is difficult at the beginning, but gets easier as time progresses. Originally, he had needed help with the heavenspan river water, but after passing into the middle level of the technique, and having successfully absorbed a drop into his spiritual seas, he now had some measure of control over the heavenspan river water. Directly absorbing water from the heavenspan river was something completely and utterly domineering, a trait which was now showing through in Bai Xiaochun's cultivation. Now that he was in mid-foundation establishment, he could actually absorb a full cup of heavenspan river water. It was there above his fourth spiritual sea, rapidly being absorbed. With the help of some medicinal pills, Bai Xiaochun helped the process along, and could sense that his aura was becoming more and more like the heavenspan rivers. Bai Xiaochun had the strange feeling that his current level of power didn't quite make him invincible within Foundation establishment, but would surely allow him to crush almost any opponents who came his way. After coming to the Bloodstream sect, he had not unleashed his heavenspan Dharma Eye on many occasions. However, he continued to cultivate it, making it grow more and more itchy, and at the same time, more powerful. Bai Xiaochun had the feeling that once he opened that eye and revealed its power, it would shake heaven and earth. The only things Bai Xiaochun wasn't very satisfied with were his human-controlling grand magic and proto-magnetic power. After beginning to cultivate the violet chi heavenspan incantation, his strength and control power had grown, but was still relatively limited. He had spent a lot of time studying proto-magnetic power, and had never given up on his plans to develop it. However, he seemed to have reached a barrier that he couldn't pass. It was very frustrating, but there was nothing he could do about it other than spend some time every day on study and contemplation regarding how to progress. There was one other thing that he spent time thinking about, and that was the Middle Peak Blood Master trial by fire that Song Junwan had mentioned, and how she wanted his help. If Song Junwan becomes Blood Master, then it stands to reason that the Grand Elder position will open up. Usually, someone would be promoted from among the Bloodstreak Elders. However, I bet that if someone was famous enough, they might be considered even if they weren't a Bloodstreak Elder already. By this point in time, Bai Xiaochun had suffered enough at the hands of the talking rabbit that he only delivered internal monologues. However, his eyes still shone brightly at the thought of the Grand Elder position opening up. That would be his greatest chance to successfully acquire the relic of eternal indestructibility, and then finally be able to leave the Bloodstream sect. I'm already just as famous in the Bloodstream sect as Song K is, which means I'm already above the Bloodstreak Elders. I'm probably not famous enough to directly become Grand Elder, though. In the next few months, I need to do something to make myself even more famous. Whether it's good or bad, I need to convince people that, despite only being in Mortal Dao Foundation establishment, I'm still a shocking and incredible expert. His eyes began to shine even more brightly than before, and that was how the days passed. The war between the Profound Stream sect and the Pill Stream sect had already reached the point where both sects had mobilized all of their forces. Rumors about the war swirled. Some stories were true, some were false, but they all left the Bloodstream sect disciples in shock. At the same time, the war preparations in the Bloodstream sect were nearing completion, and disciples were already being dispatched from the sect to parts unknown. Bai Xiaochun could see the blood clouds which hovered over the sect growing larger, and building up pressure to a terrifying degree. Even the blood chi within the sect seemed to be growing stronger. Despite the fact that Bai Xiaochun was in secluded meditation and rarely emerged, stories about Night Crypt continued to spread, and they only grew more fantastic as time went on. For some reason, a lot of people knew why Song K had been punished by being sent into secluded meditation. There even seemed to be some hidden force trying to get people riled up against Night Crypt. As time progressed, the cultivators of Middle Peak continued to grow both more hateful of him and more fearful. People even began to talk about how Night Crypt and young Lady Shui Mei didn't get along, and many people hoped that she would eventually put him in his place. Young Lady Shui Mei, please come out and teach Night Crypt a lesson. Night Crypt is so terrifying. Everyone on Middle Peak and Corpse Peak is miserable because of him. Middle Peak's Grand Elder always takes Night Crypt's side. Young lady Shui Mei, please come out and cut him down. Shui Mei got requests like that just about every day. At the same time, stories about Night Crypt continued to spread. Eventually, it reached the point where many people viewed him as something on the level of a devil king. However, there wasn't much Shui Mei could do. Night Crypt was favored by the patriarchs, skilled in the Tao of medicine, extremely famous, and had a reputation that put him on the same level as Song Ke. A person like that wasn't somebody that Shui Mei could openly make a move against. Furthermore, she could sense that he possessed extraordinary battle prowess, and knew that if she fought him, she wouldn't be able to beat him quickly. So she sat down cross-legged in her immortal's cave, eyes flashing coldly as she contemplated the matter. It wasn't lost on her that someone was trying to provoke her into killing Night Crypt. In the end, she didn't care who it was that was doing such a thing. After all, she already wanted to kill Night Crypt. It won't be long now before the Bloodmaster trial by fire begins, and that slut Song Junwan and I will finally face off. Song Junwan is probably counting on Night Crypt to help her, so getting rid of him would be a boon for me. Shui Mei chuckled coldly, the killing intent in her eyes growing more intense. Night Crypt never made much of a name for himself before. But after he came back from the fallen sword abyss, he suddenly rose to the top. It's almost like he's a different person. So very strange. There's definitely something fishy going on with him. Definitely. I just need to find out what it is. Since she knew she wasn't a match for him openly, it was time to start plotting. At a point when the sect was just on the verge of going to war, the potential for destructive consequences was even greater. As Shui Mei investigated Night Crypt's background, a rumor began to spread through the Bloodstream sect. Supposedly, after getting medicinal pills from Night Crypt, the Bloodmaster of Corpse Peak had immediately gone into secluded meditation, and still hadn't emerged. However, powerful ripples had begun to emanate from Corpse Peak's Bloodmaster Temple. Quite a few people noticed those fluctuations, especially the Bloodmasters from Lesser Marsh Peak and Nameless Peak. All three of the current Bloodmasters were relatively evenly matched, but now it seemed as if the Corpse Peak Bloodmaster was experiencing a breakthrough. It wasn't likely that he would reach Gold Core, but to Corpse Peak, a breakthrough in corpse refining techniques would lead to a rapid and significant increase in battle prowess. Because of that, the Bloodmasters of Lesser Marsh Peak and Nameless Peak started to get nervous. A few days later, the Grand Elder of Lesser Marsh Peak shot through the air in a beam of light to appear outside of Bai Xiaochun's Immortals Cave. He was a tall and well-built man, with a mighty look and a powerful aura of qi and blood. As a body refinement cultivator, he almost seemed like a mountain standing there, emanating powerful pressure. Even his voice was deep and resounding as he said, "It's me, Grand Elder Han Chundong of Lesser Marsh Peak. Junior brother Night Crypt, are you home?" The blood trees outside Bai Xiaochun's Immortals Cave were trembling, but didn't dare to flee. No matter how scared they were of outsiders, Night Crypt was far more terrifying. All they could do was grit their teeth and remain in place, glaring at the Lesser Marsh Peak Grand Elder. Bai Xiaochun was currently meditating in his Immortals Cave. He had been a bit surprised when he sensed the Grand Elder's arrival moments ago. However, he could already guess why he might be here. After a moment of silence, he waved his right hand, causing the cave door to open. Then he ordered the blood trees to clear a path. The Lesser Marsh Peak Grand Elder strode into the courtyard outside Bai Xiaochun's Immortals Cave, even as Bai Xiaochun emerged. As soon as they saw each other, the Grand Elder laughed heartily and clasped hands in formal greeting. "Junior brother Night Crypt, the moment you stepped off of the blood precipice back then, I knew that you were destined for extraordinary things. It's too bad you chose to go to Middle Peak. I would have loved for you to have come to Lesser Marsh Peak." Bai Xiaochun smiled, although considering that he was wearing the mask, it was a very sinister and cold smile. Clasping hands, he said, "Grand Elder, your presence brings honor to my humble dwelling. Please, come in." Abandoning any other formalities, the Grand Elder followed as Bai Xiaochun led the way into the Immortals Cave. Once inside, they sat down across from each other, and the Grand Elder said, "Junior brother Night Crypt, you have an extraordinary cultivation base, and shocking latent talent. You prepared long and hard, and then made an incredible rise to the top. Middle Peak is truly blessed to have you, Junior brother Night Crypt." Although Bai Xiaochun was very pleased to hear such words, he maintained a somber expression, and didn't even respond to the Grand Elder's words. "Even more amazing is that the patriarchs have taken a liking to you. There are virtually no limits to what you can accomplish in the future, Junior brother Night Crypt. The Grand Elder sighed, and then went on to talk about the war between the Profound and Pillstream sects, as well as various other Bloodstream sect matters, both big and small. He also used a variety of different methods to heap praise upon Bai Xiaochun. From his facial expression, Bai Xiaochun didn't seem to be very impressed, but he was actually savoring the moment. He felt very proud to be the subject of such flattery. Occasionally he nodded, occasionally he shook his head, and occasionally he laughed heartily. After about an hour passed, the Grand Elder apparently felt Bai Xiaochun had been sufficiently warmed up. He was just about to launch into the true reason for his visit, when he suddenly realized that Bai Xiaochun was looking at him with an encouraging gleam in his eyes. He hesitated for a moment, then launched into another round of praise. Junior brother Nightcrypt, you are a man of striking appearance and talent, like a mighty dragon among men. In fact, you can count on one hand the number of people in the Bloodstream sect who can compare to you in terms of reputation. After enough time had passed for an incense stick to burn, the Grand Elder's mouth was starting to dry up. At this point, he figured it was probably time to move on to more important matters. However, a quick look at Bai Xiaochun confirmed that he seemed to be completely immersed in the sensation of being praised. The Grand Elder hesitated for a moment. However, he had come here to ask for help, and therefore, he gritted his teeth and racked his brain to come up with new methods of offering praise. Another hour passed, and the Grand Elder finally ran out of words. However, Bai Xiaochun seemed more caught up in the moment than ever. Why did you stop talking? He looked over curiously at the Grand Elder. Lesser Marsh Peak's Grand Elder was taken aback, but he gritted his teeth and forced out a few more sentences. In the end, he sighed at the realization that Nightcrypt was profoundly enigmatic, and definitely could never be viewed as an ordinary cultivator. Finally, he clasped hands and bowed. Junior brother Nightcrypt, you are truly brilliant and stupendous. I deeply admire you, truly. Since that's the case, I won't beat around the bush anymore. The reason I've come here today is because I'm simply incapable of allowing injustice in the world. Junior brother Nightcrypt, your Tao of medicine is shocking. However, despite the fact that you concocted medicine for Corpse Peak, the conscienceless Corpse Peak cultivators not only refused to be thankful, they actually chose to hate you. When Bai Xiaochun thought back to the things that had happened in the past, his expression turned grim, and he let out a cold harumph. The Grand Elder and Blood Master of Corpse Peak are the worst of them all, the Grand Elder continued, eyes smoldering with righteous indignation. You actually went to concoct medicine for them personally, but they repaid you by venting their anger on you. Completely preposterous. However, you can rest at ease about the matter, Junior brother Nightcrypt. The Blood Master of Lesser Marsh Peak has already petitioned to the sect to publicly clear your name. Bai Xiaochun shook his head and sighed. I offer you profound thanks, Grand Elder. And the same goes to the Blood Master. However, the matter has ended. Besides, I actually learned quite a bit from that event. Junior brother Nightcrypt, there's no need to be so polite. You reached inverse blood ancestral awakening, and are exceptionally talented in body refinement. You have a berserk ghost defense. You're like family to us on Lesser Marsh Peak. The Grand Elder laughed loudly. Corpse Peak doesn't know the difference between good and bad, so we might as well just ignore them. However, considering that we're basically family, how about this? Junior brother Nightcrypt, why don't you concoct some spirit medicine for Lesser Marsh Peak? I guarantee that even if you destroy the mountain, the Blood Master and I won't even frown in response. The Grand Elder even slapped his chest to emphasize his honesty. Bai Xiaochun said, feeling a bit hesitant. Don't worry, Junior brother Nightcrypt, I know the protocol. He pulled a bag of holding out from his robe and placed it down in front of Bai Xiaochun. After picking it up and looking inside, Bai Xiaochun found a large quantity of medicinal plants and a sizable collection of spirit stones. Feeling very pleased, he was about to agree, when suddenly his expression flickered. The Grand Elder of Lesser Marsh Peak also frowned, and the two of them looked out of the Immortals' cave. Junior brother Nightcrypt, are you home? It's me, Grand Elder Zheng Chinkin of Nameless Peak. The Grand Elder of Nameless Peak, the dwarf, was right outside. His expression was the same as ever, but inwardly he was very nervous. For quite some time, both he and the Blood Master of Nameless Peak had wavered back and forth about Bai Xiaochun's pill concocting. However, after hearing that the Grand Elder of Lesser Marsh Peak had shown upon on Middle Peak, they knew that they couldn't just sit around and do nothing. That was especially true of the Nameless Peak Blood Master. Therefore, he sent the Grand Elder hurrying over, worried the whole time about whether or not he could convince Nightcrypt to concoct medicine for Nameless Peak. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then rose to his feet and went out to receive the Grand Elder from Nameless Peak and lead him inside. As soon as the Grand Elder from Nameless Peak entered, he saw Han Chundong. When their eyes met, they blazed with a competitive flare. Junior brother Night Crypt, the dwarf said, I'm not the kind of person to waste words. If you concoct a special Tier 4 spirit medicine for Nameless Peak, then we will double whatever Lesser Marsh Peak has offered you. Our only condition is that you concoct medicine for us first. The dwarf spoke in a very domineering fashion. However, before Bai Xiaochun could respond, Han Chundong snorted and shot to his feet, radiating a murderous aura. Junior brother Night Crypt, that bag of holding only contains the initial deposit. If you concoct medicine for us first, then we'll give you full access to our secret body refinement techniques. You can even cultivate the secret magic of Lesser Marsh Peak. The Grand Elder from Lesser Marsh Peak gritted his teeth. He wasn't sure how much free time Bai Xiaochun had, but he knew that it often took many days for him to concoct medicine. Considering that war was looming, he was desperate to get this medicine concocted. Because of that, he would do everything he could to make sure the Blood Master from his mountain peak was first in line. Bai Xiaochun was moved. The truth was that he did want to do some research into Lesser Marsh Peak's body refinement techniques. After all, they seemed connected to the Undying Codex. Off to the side, the dwarf seemed shocked by the other Grand Elder's words. However, as soon as he saw the expression on Bai Xiaochun's face, he gritted his teeth and said, Junior brother Night Crypt, Nameless Peak has prepared a gargoyle just for you. We can teach you Nameless Peak's gargoyle refining magics. In response to his words, Han Chundong glared at him angrily. Bai Xiaochun was quivering in eagerness. The gargoyle magics of Nameless Peak were top secret, and cultivators from outside of that mountain peak had to spend a huge amount of merit points to study them. Their incredible value was difficult to put into words. Han Chundong looked at Bai Xiaochun and said, Junior brother Night Crypt, the best rule to follow is first come first served. Lesser Marsh Peak was the first to come here to request medicine concocting, so please take that into careful consideration. The dwarf looked over and said, Junior brother Night Crypt, Nameless Peak is willing to double their offer. Bai Xiaochun rubbed his forehead, then looked back and forth between the two. Chuckling, he said, it's true. First come first served is the most fair. I'll start at Lesser Marsh Peak. I hope that Grand Elder and Blood Master from Nameless Peak won't take offense. Also, there's no need to offer double. I understand that both of you are here to represent your respective Blood Masters. How about this? I'll promise that no matter who I concoct medicine for, I'll get it done before the war starts. For both of you, I guarantee it. The two Grand Elders were visibly moved. The truth was that neither of them wanted to get into a bidding war. Seeing how smoothly Bai Xiaochun had handled the situation, they felt even better about him than before. Nodding, they proceeded to chat a bit longer before clasping hands and leaving. After seeing them off, Bai Xiaochun returned to his immortals cave and sat down cross-legged. After a moment of thought, he chuckled to himself. I have the Emerald Zombie from Corpse Peak, and I've gotten the Grand Elder from Middle Peak to fall for me. If I get a gargoyle from Nameless Peak and cultivate body refinement on Lesser Marsh Peak, then I'll be more important in the Bloodstream sect than ever. I'll be similar to a Bloodstreak Elder. By the time Song Junwan becomes Bloodmaster, I'll be far more likely to snag the spot of Grand Elder for myself. Bai Xiaochun had made up his mind, and there was no time to waste. The next morning at the crack of dawn, he left Middle Peak for Lesser Marsh Peak. Lesser Marsh Peak was the pinky finger on the enormous hand that housed the Bloodstream sect. Although it was smaller than the other fingers, the cultivators there all practiced body refinement, and were far more powerful and ferocious than their contemporaries in the sect. Almost as soon as Bai Xiaochun arrived on the mountain, he could see how much taller and burlier the cultivators there were. They exuded an aura of qi and blood that filled all of Lesser Marsh Peak. Bai Xiaochun was a bit shocked to be surrounded by so many mighty individuals. All of the cultivators were like that, regardless of whether they were male or female. Although he was a bit nervous, he refused to be intimidated. You people think you're as strong as me? HMPH, what good is there in being big and burly? I have the power of 4 berserk ghosts. Blinking a few times, he hurried up one of the mountain paths. All of the cultivators he passed had wary expressions on their faces, as well as cold gleams in their eyes. Obviously, the reputation of Plague Devil had reached all ears on Lesser Marsh Peak, and the people there recognized him immediately. Before long, Bai Xiaochun was on the upper finger of Lesser Marsh Peak, where Grand Elder Han Chundong was waiting for him. After some pleasantries were exchanged, Han Chundong led him to Lesser Marsh Peak's Bloodmaster Temple. Inside the temple, Lesser Marsh Peak's Bloodmaster was sitting cross-legged. As soon as Bai Xiaochun stepped inside, he rose to his feet and smiled broadly. Junior brother Nightcrypt. The Blood Master was a powerfully built middle-aged man who radiated a power and energy that seemed to surpass Han Chundong. Bai Xiaochun felt almost like he was looking at a giant whose aura caused all of the blood qi in the area to surge into motion. The sudden pressure that Bai Xiaochun felt caused him to pause in mid-stride and look in shock at the Blood Master, who was currently hurrying over to meet him. Bai Xiaochun paid close attention, and immediately picked up on some clues regarding his body refinement technique. It's similar to the second level of the Undying Heavenly King? Despite being shaken inwardly, his expression remained the same as ever. Smiling broadly, he clasped hands and bowed in greeting. Nightcrypt offers greetings, Blood Master. The Blood Master looked at Bai Xiaochun with shining eyes, and then spoke in a booming voice. There's no need for such formality, junior brother Nightcrypt. I'm a straightforward person, and hate beating around the bush. I need you to concoct me a batch of Tier 4 blood body pills. Such pills only serve one function, to rapidly propel you to the next level in Lesser Marsh Peak's secret body refinement technique. War is upon us, and everyone is working hard to prepare. Unfortunately, this pill won't be hugely effective unless it's Tier 5, and Tier 4 versions are unavailable for purchase inside the sect. Therefore, what I need is not a single pill, I need at least 100 Tier 4 blood body pills. Nightcrypt, are you confident enough to concoct me 100 Tier 4 blood body pills? The Blood Master's eyes glittered as he looked at Bai Xiaochun, his words echoing back and forth in Blood Master Temple. Bai Xiaochun's ears heard a bit from the Blood Master's booming voice. Not willing to accept that, he raised his own voice into a virtual roar and replied, if I have enough medicinal plants and pill furnaces, then 100 pills should be no problem. At first, the Blood Master was surprised by Bai Xiaochun's roaring voice. He was used to using a booming voice when talking with others, but wasn't used to the opposite happening. After looking Bai Xiaochun up and down for a moment, he started laughing. Oh, I have plenty of medicinal plants, he said. As far as pill furnaces are concerned, come, junior brother Nightcrypt. I want to show you the one-of-a-kind pill furnace we've prepared for you. The Blood Master's subsequent laughter shook the entire mountain peak. Waving his sleeve, he swept up both Bai Xiaochun and the Grand Elder, who had been standing respectfully off to the side. All three of them then flew through the air toward a wide open space which had been set aside on the upper finger. It was protected by a powerful spell formation, the fluctuations and aura of which were so intense that even the hallucinatory mist that had appeared on Corpse Peak would not be able to escape it. Clearly, Lesser Marsh Peak had taken many precautions before inviting him over to concoct pills. Seeing all of that, Bai Xiaochun coughed dryly, but didn't say anything. Following the Blood Master, he entered an Immortals cave inside of the spell formation. It was a newly built Immortals cave, in the depths of which was a vast hall set aside for a single object. Almost as soon as Bai Xiaochun laid eyes on it, he gasped, and his eyes glittered with bright light. He immediately began to circle around the object, and was unable to hold back his gasps as he did. It was a pill furnace of enormous size. It was fully 90 meters in diameter, green in color, and engraved with countless magical symbols. There was something majestic about it that made it seem profoundly and shockingly sturdy. This pill furnace. Bai Xiaochun reached out and touched it, and the awe-inspiring feeling he got left him even more excited than before. One of his main problems had always been exploding pill furnaces, leaving him no option other than to reduce the medicinal strength of his concoctions, and preventing him from unleashing his full skill in the Tao of medicine. The moment he saw this pill furnace, however, he was deeply shaken. Junior brother Nightcrypt, many generations ago, a Blood Master of Lesser Marsh Peak robbed this precious treasure from the Pill Stream sect. The truth is that it isn't the original precious treasure, only a replica. However, it's a replica of none other than the Heaven-Earth Furnace Cauldron. I personally arranged for you to be able to use it today. With this furnace, you can be as bold as you wish in your medicine concocting. Don't worry, a precious treasure like this won't explode under any circumstances. The Blood Master threw his head back and laughed proudly. He was a body refinement cultivator, but that didn't mean he wasn't a cautious person. He was very familiar with the moniker Plague Devil, and had prepared a pill furnace that couldn't explode, placed inside of a spell formation so impenetrable that not even the slightest scrap of an aura could escape from it. Only after having made these preparations was he confident that no mishaps would occur. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath as he walked around the pill furnace a few more times, examining it. He was already itching with the desire to go all out, to experiment with medicinal strength that, up to this point, had been impossible for him. And yet, he was still a bit nervous. Looking over at the Blood Master, he said, "Are you sure that this pill furnace will never explode?" "Of course I'm sure," the Blood Master replied, smiling proudly. Patting the pill furnace gently, Bai Xiaochun laughed and said, fine. If you're absolutely sure, then Night Crypt will concoct your medicine for you. The Blood Master joined him in his laughter, then gazed at him deeply for a moment before throwing over a bag of holding. Then he turned and left. The Grand Elder clasped hands formally, then also left. Bai Xiaochun was now alone in the Immortals' cave, looking at the enormous pill furnace, his excitement building. After a moment passed, he examined the bag of holding, which was full of medicinal plants and bloodflame stones. It also contained a jade slip. In addition to the pill formula for the blood body pill, the jade slip also contained Lesser Marsh Peak's secret body refinement technique. Way of the Blood Fiend Body. Bai Xiaochun immediately set about studying it. By the time he finished, it was nighttime, whereupon he closed his eyes to think. After a long moment passed, his eyes opened, and they shone with enlightenment. The way of the Blood Fiend Body had been studied by generation after generation of cultivators on Lesser Marsh Peak, and was derived from the huge hand that the sect rested on. It was essentially an inferior version of the Undying Codex, an imitation. It derived power based on totem tattoos, and was divided into power levels of the Ancient Mammoth, the Berserk Ghost, the Heavenly Demon, and the Blood Fiend. By absorbing blood chi into one's own flesh and blood, then catalyzing it with the secret technique, the body's basic structure would transform, and eventually be capable of unleashing powerful fleshly body power. Although it seemed to have a lot in common with the Undying Codex that Bai Xiaochun cultivated, the truth was that it was extremely counterproductive. The Undying Codex didn't change one's basic body structure, it directly unleashed inner power to create a powerful combination of offense and defense. However, the way of the Blood Fiend Body does have some redeeming qualities. Maybe I can even use them to make an early breakthrough in the second level of the Undying Heavenly King. After a bit of further examination, Bai Xiaochun's spirits rose, and he even tested out some of the cultivation practices. When he did, rumbling sounds could be heard as blood chi rushed toward him. By using the secret techniques of the way of the Blood Fiend Body, he stimulated his flesh and blood, but instead of allowing his basic body structure to be changed, he used the power to drive the Undying Heavenly King. The night passed. The next morning at dawn, Bai Xiaochun's eyes snapped open, and they shone with delight. That one night of cultivation was like 3 days of ordinary cultivation. So it does work. Ha ha ha. Excited, Bai Xiaochun mused that the Bloodstream sect truly was his personal holy land. Looking over at the enormous pill furnace, his eyes shone with a strange light, and he suddenly smacked his hand down onto the furnace. A bang could be heard as the furnace's lid opened up. Without any hesitation, he flew up to stand on the edge of the furnace and looked down inside, which left him even more shocked than before. If this furnace really can't explode, then I think I need to test the limits of the medicinal strength I'm capable of producing. Just when he was about to start, he suddenly paused for a moment. It really won't explode? He thought, hesitating. Whatever. The Blood Master guaranteed that it wouldn't explode. It probably won't. Taking a deep breath, he tossed caution to the wind. A look of madness appeared in his eyes as prepared to concoct a huge batch of pills. The last time I used dragonchimp grass, I could only use 1 blade, but this time I'm gonna put in 10. Firecloud pears, huh? Let's put in 20 of them. So, it calls for starlight leaf? It says half a leaf should do, but with an incredible pill furnace like this, that's definitely not enough. I'm putting in 10. Murmuring to himself, he continued to circle the edge of the pill furnace, tossing in one type of medicinal plant after another. After making minor adjustments here and there, he would add more plants. Bloodflame stones poured out of his bag of holding to land underneath the pill furnace, providing intense heat. However, this was no ordinary pill furnace. Other pill furnaces would have turned bright red from the heat, but this one hardly seemed to be getting hot at all. Seeing that, Bai Xiaochun got even more excited than before. He was slowly immersing himself in his medicine concocting, tossing more and more medicinal plants into the mix, doing nothing to prevent the medicinal strength from growing rapidly. At the same time, he was completely engrossed in making calculations regarding the medicine formula. He felt completely and utterly satisfied. He didn't have to worry about the cost of the materials he was using, didn't have to worry about the medicinal strength increasing to unsafe levels, and didn't need to worry about losing control of the pill furnace. The only thing he worried about was how to concoct the pill. His hair was disheveled and his eyes were bloodshot, but he felt wonderful, and more excited than he ever had been before. For 7 days, he continued to add more medicinal plants to the mix. Eventually, more than half of the bag of holding had been emptied. By using the principles of mutual augmentation and suppression, Bai Xiaochun had pushed the medicinal strength to an explosive level. Rumbling sounds began to emanate from the pill furnace, which by this point was changing from green to bright red. By now, it seemed that the furnace really wouldn't explode. Seeing that, Bai Xiaochun threw his head back and laughed uproariously. "A precious furnace," he exclaimed. With that, he descended back into the medicine concocting. Based on his calculations regarding the medicine formula, he continued to add medicinal plants. As inspiration hit him, and as his train of thought proceeded, he made changes as he saw fit. Combined with the all-creation plants and vegetation technique, he was gradually reaching the medicinal strength he sought. Another 5 days passed, and the rumbling sounds inside of the pill furnace grew more intense. By now, the furnace was bright red, and Bai Xiaochun had added all of the medicinal plants he wanted to. He was sitting off to the side looking very content when he suddenly thought of something. Hurrying forward, he produced a drop of his own undying blood and added it into the furnace. With that, he put the lid back on the furnace and locked it tight. In that instant, any outlet for the medicinal strength was cut off, causing intense rumbling sounds to echo out. The pill furnace began to shake, and the temperature inside began to rise rapidly. Bai Xiaochun was so impressed with the miraculous pill furnace that he didn't even think about any potential problems. As far as he was concerned, it wouldn't explode. Therefore, he decided to practice some cultivation off to the side. Occasionally, he would look over and make a few adjustments as the medicinal strength inside the pill furnace changed. A few days later, he started to get worried. The pill furnace was now bright red, and radiating such intense heat that the area for 3 meters around the furnace was rippling and distorting. Cracks were even visible on the ground, snaking out from the furnace. Bai Xiaochun swallowed, and edged away. The waves of heat battering his face caused his heart to begin to pound with fear. If a pill furnace this big exploded, I would lose my poor little life for sure. Blinking, he thought back to what the Lesser Marsh Peak Bloodmaster had said. This furnace won't explode under any circumstances. Only then did he calm down a bit. There shouldn't be any problems, right? He was already starting to regret putting in so many medicinal plants. Lack of control was definitely one of his downsides. However, the pill furnace currently didn't seem to be in danger of exploding. He waited for 4 more days. The furnace was still trembling, and the area of distortion had increased from 3 meters to 30. The intense heat was even causing some of the nearby rock walls to slowly melt. The heat seemed to be building up with every passing moment. Bai Xiaochun was sweating up a storm, and his eyes were already wide with terror. He thought about trying to stop the concoction process, but wasn't able to interfere. The spirit medicine inside the pill furnace was already beginning to take shape. He could only imagine how the temperature might increase now that the medicine was actually forming. Bai Xiaochun took a long, nervous breath. He felt like he was sitting on top of a volcano that might erupt at any moment. He nervously edged backward until he was outside of the Immortals' cave. Finally, he put on a lofty, enigmatic expression and walked out of the spell formation as he prepared to leave Lesser Marsh Peak. In his opinion, Lesser Marsh Peak was now far too dangerous of a place to remain in. On his way out, the Grand Elder detected him and flew over to stop him from leaving. "Junior brother Nightcrypt," he said politely, "where might you be headed now? Are you finished concocting our medicine?" Bai Xiaochun was very nervous, but his expression didn't show it at all. Clasping his hands behind his back, he coolly said, "Don't worry. The concocting process is done. However, the 100 blood body pills need more time to develop. In 3 months I'll come back personally to extract the pills from the furnace. In the meantime, I'll head to Nameless Peak. After all, I promised to concoct medicine for them too." Despite having been forced to scramble to come up with an excuse, Bai Xiaochun's expression was the same as ever. Lesser Marsh Peak's Grand Elder was still a bit suspicious, but couldn't find any fault with Bai Xiaochun's reasoning. "Well, in that case, Junior brother Nightcrypt," he said, "I'll personally escort you all the way to Nameless Peak." He still felt that something was off, but nevertheless, gestured for Bai Xiaochun to follow him to Nameless Peak. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then nodded and followed along. Soon he had reached the border of Nameless Peak, where the dwarf Grand Elder came out to meet him. Only then did Bai Xiaochun finally breathe a sigh of relief. Even as he proceeded on to Nameless Peak, he turned to look back at the Grand Elder from Lesser Marsh Peak. "By the way," he said, "during the next 3 months, no one is permitted to enter that Immortals' cave. And definitely do not let anyone touch the pill furnace. The pill furnace might burst open, and if it does, you'll be responsible." With that, he looked away and followed the dwarf onto Nameless Peak. He also made a decision to never, ever go back to Lesser Marsh Peak. If what the Blood Master of Lesser Marsh Peak said is true, then the pill furnace won't explode. The medicinal pills will eventually be completed. If that pill furnace explodes, it's not my fault. The more he thought about it, the more he believed himself to be in the right. Feeling much better, he followed the nameless Peak Grand Elder to meet the local Bloodmaster. In accordance with the previous agreement, the Bloodmaster gave Bai Xiaochun a gargoyle. Furthermore, they had set aside an immortal's cave on the lower finger where he could concoct medicine. By the time he went in to begin his work, word was already spreading through Nameless Peak about his arrival, leading to gasps among the cultivators there. They already felt like they were going to go mad in the coming days. They knew about Bai Xiaochun's nickname, Plague Devil, and had heard that the terrors which came along with his pill concocting were like tribulations wrought by patriarchs. All of them felt as though they were heading into a life or death crisis. The Nameless Peak cultivators began to think about everything that had occurred on Middle Peak and Corpse Peak. They weren't as confident as the cultivators from Lesser Marsh Peak, and were thus soon shaking in their boots. Plague Devil's here. The terror he causes with his medicine concocting is unimaginable. Remember Zhao Shuimu from Corpse Peak? He hallucinated that he was a tuft of spirit grass. Even down to this day, he sometimes goes into a daze if he sees spirit grass. That's nothing. You know Zhou Yibiao? When he sleeps at night, he sometimes yells out that he is Bai Xiaochun. Actually, there are quite a few cultivators from Middle Peak who have recovered, but still haven't grown back hair, and still have occasional bouts of diarrhea. In fact, it's been on more than one occasion that I saw someone from Middle Peak get the upper hand in a fight, only to suddenly look very uncomfortable. You know what I mean, right? Discussions such as these spread like wildfire. As for the cultivators who actually resided near the location where Bai Xiaochun was doing his concocting work, their scalps tingled like mad, and many of them simply left. Before long, more than half of the cultivators who normally occupied Nameless Peak had abandoned their immortals' caves and gone to stay with people they knew in the inner sect. Bai Xiaochun was a bit shocked at how quiet Nameless Peak became. Not a trace of a living person could be seen anywhere near his immortal's cave. Clearing his throat, he thought to himself, I haven't even done anything yet. What are these people being so jumpy for? I concocted medicine on Lesser Marsh Peak and nothing happened. A bit annoyed, he sat down cross-legged and looked around the immortal's cave for a moment until his gaze came to rest on something in the far corner. A black shadow floated there, emanating a cold and sinister aura. It was one of the Nameless Peak gargoyles, which were somewhat akin to the evil ghosts that could be found on Ghostfong Peak in the Spirit Stream sect. The main difference was that the evil ghosts weren't intelligent, and didn't grow very large either. In contrast, gargoyles became more intelligent as they grew, and could also practice their own form of cultivation. In terms of power and strength, they were no weaker than evil ghosts, and yet, were vastly more cunning and sly. After they reached a certain level of power, they would develop a bizarre divine ability that allowed them to possess humans and even control them. By becoming something like an inner devil, they could kill people without leaving a single mark, whereupon they would viciously drain them of their blood. Different methods could be used to raise different types of gargoyles. One of the reasons why the Bloodstream sect was known as a devilish sect was because of the devilish gargoyles that they raised. Bai Xiaochun wasn't too sure about the origins of the gargoyles. That was one of the big secrets of the Bloodstream sect. As for the gargoyle in the Immortals' cave with him, it was completely ordinary, with low intelligence. It was even frightened of Bai Xiaochun's murderous aura, and didn't dare to approach him. Instead, it cowered in the corner, trembling. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.